Thank you very much, Rachel. If anybody has a burning question you'd like to ask now, please do. Otherwise, if you can hold it until the end of the session when we'll open up for questions. So no burning questions at the moment? Right, but they're all making notes, Rachel, so you're not going to escape. Right. So thank you very much for that. And I'd now like to pass on to Ivy. And excuse me, I have my crib sheet here. So Ivy's from the Californian Digital Library and is Associate Executive Director and was the principal investigator for the Pay It Forward campaign, which again was looking at trying to look at large-scale flipping to open access research, particularly for American research. And I was also interested that I believe it is the Californian Digital Library that has recently released a toolkit for American libraries on how to convert their publishing efforts into open access. And I think that's an interesting initiative that's come out of California. And also that you've released your new strategic vision for the next 5 years. You see, I've been doing my research. And the point that got me about that was very much about, rather than setting hard and fast goals, is recognizing that open access is much more of a fluid environment and needing to be agile and to actually adapt your strategies as you're moving forward into the open access environment. So very much looking forward to your talk. Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you. Thanks, Pippa and everyone. And I think we got the order of this presentation right. We were wondering what order to do things in, but much of what I say is going to mirror and feed off of what some of the material that Rachel just presented. So I think everyone here probably knows a lot about the University of California and CDL, but just a quick recap. We're a 10-campus university system, very large system with 250,000 students, a very large faculty and other academic system. We spend about $4.6 billion in research every year. And our annual publication output is about 40,000 articles per year. So a pretty substantial system. Like most institutions in the US, UC is really a green institution right now. And that has led to a tremendous diffusion of research from the University of California all over the globe. So we found that our articles in our green repository are accessed all over the globe, and that's really a very good thing, and we're very pleased about that. But I think we all understand that green is ultimately a route to somewhere else, and it's the somewhere else that we're trying to get to. There are quite a few challenges and deficiencies, if you will, in the green repository system. And ultimately, it's perpetuating a subscription environment that hinders rather than facilitates change. And we're also finding at UC, although we have been a leading institution in terms of faculty open access policies, that our faculty are also becoming impatient for the future and for the next phase of open access, of immediate open access, and that's something that we're also responding to. But something that Rachel highlighted is something that we've also been fussing over for quite a while, and that is the rather disconnect between the policies in North America and the policies in Europe with respect to green versus gold open access. Publishing is a global system, and yet we do not have global infrastructure and global policies and financial expectations about how that system should evolve. And that, to us, is something that is also hindering change and hindering further uptake. And the figures that Rachel started out with of the almost 20-year history of open access advocacy and the uptake that's led to is something that we're increasingly concerned about and want to address. So how do we move beyond that divide? Well, we have to listen to our authors, and our authors tell us that they want alternatives that preserve the prestige system that they participate in today. And on the left-hand side of the screen is a quote from several years ago from one of our faculty that said that the solutions that, the open access solutions that we develop should be no more inconvenient to them than the forms that, that they now sign that surrender our rights. In other words, they want publishing to be easy and to facilitate the work that they're doing today. And I thought Toby Green had a somewhat provocative comment when he said that the failure, I'm not sure that there's a failure right now, but there certainly is an impediment, and that's partly beholden to stakeholders not being ready to change and the scale of the change that we need. So these factors, this is really the same list essentially as the one that Rachel just showed. This comes out of our Pay It Forward study that the University of California did a couple of years ago, and I'll come back to that in a minute. This is some work that Carol Tenopir did for us, conducting author surveys and focus groups across a range of institutions, not just the University of California, but some of our high research-intensive peer institutions as well. And you can see that this mirrors what I think we all intuitively know and know by experience, which is that open access is really at the bottom of the list. As much as our authors value it, they value other things more. And there are other things that are really driving their publishing activity. So the preferences of authors are one of the things that have led us to think about how do we transform the existing corpus. And I say that coming from the perspective that many institutions in the U.S., in addition to U.S. being a largely green country from a policy perspective, many of the library perspectives in the U.S. favor transformation in the form of new infrastructure, academy-owned infrastructure, moving away from the existing journals to something that can be more innovative and academy-driven. But our authors are telling us something different, which is that the existing journal corpus is something that they continue to value. And so this has led us to support for OA 2020, which is an initiative, as most of you know, that's started at the Max Planck Society to transform the existing literature to open access largely through conversion of existing publisher arrangements, although many other mechanisms as well. And so we have been thinking about how we might move in that direction in the US, but we need a version of that that can work in the North American context. So 6 of the UC campuses have signed on to OA 2020, probably more will follow suit as well. Our faculty across the university have all considered OA 2020 independently in their own academic senate committees, and they have consistently across the university voted to support OA 2020 as a movement to transform the literature. As many of you know and may have seen other presentations, so I won't dwell on this, but in 2016, the CDL and UC Davis collaborated on a study of how we might transform or facilitate a large-scale conversion of the literature using the APC, under an APC model for North American research institutions. So the research question here was those of us who are central players in the research publishing enterprise where the bulk of the research publishing is happening, are likely to bear a significant cost if the world transitioned to an APC model. Is this something that would be affordable and sustainable for the large research institutions? What would the impact be? We had quite a few collaborators on this project, in addition to the UC campuses, Harvard, Ohio State, University of British Columbia, ALPSP helped us with this project, as did Thomson Reuters at the time, Web of Science, and Elsevier with analytics via Scopus. We had a range of consultants working with us. I mentioned Carol Tenopir. We also had a number of economists working with us. And the link that I provided here is to our 184-page report. It's scintillating bedtime reading, so if you haven't read it, I'm sure you'll want to take it to bed with you. But a lot of detail and analytics there. Just briefly, the findings that are important for this discussion: affordability. What we looked at was what would happen if we took the library expenditures today on research journals and converted those to an APC model under using the best modeling that we were able to do of what a reasonable, practical, realistic APC might be. And what we found that slightly under $2,000 was the average APC for the institutions in our complement that are already publishing in native OA journals. So this was not an analysis based so much on hybrid publishing as on native OA journals, where we thought was a better benchmark for sort of true sustainability, if you will. And of course, what we found was even at that level, with our library budgets today, we could not afford a switch to APCs just using library funds alone. But if grant funding is brought into the equation, then a flip to APCs becomes much more affordable for large research institutions. So an important takeaway here is that grant funding is an important element of the, any ability to flip to an APC-based model. We also tried to analyze what might lead to long-term sustainability. This is more hypothetical than driven by observation, because we don't have enough evidence to observe. But the surveys and the analysis that we did suggested to us that involving authors in the transaction for open access is the most promising route to long-term cost control, that authors make decisions based not so much on open access, but that if they have to actually hand over money, that will play into their thinking. And our surveys tested that to some degree. We assume then publishers will respond to that, because publishers compete for authors. They don't really compete for library business so much as they compete for authorship, in our view. And so we think that if authors are engaged in the process of paying for publication in some way, that will lead to a better competitive environment, and that will be a potential route to cost control. So this is an idea, again, that came out of our Pay It Forward study. So this led us to a multi-payer, what we called a multi-payer model, a model in which libraries would support open access publication, but authors would also be asked to support publication through grants or other startup funds or other discretionary research funds that might be available to them. If authors don't have those funds available, then the library would pick up the balance and support their publication. So we are trying to develop a model, or a conceptual model, in which authors do not have to pay out of their pull money out of their personal pocket, but they would have to allocate funds that are institutional or grant funds to publishing, and that would be part of the economic driver. I'll elaborate a little bit more on this in a minute. Since we posited that we need grant funding as part of this equation, we wanted to understand what the impact might be on funders and funders' pocketbooks. This is some analysis that we did not as part of Pay It Forward, but subsequently but using, again, some of the data that we had from Pay It Forward and from other public sources. So this is somewhat an early calculation. I wouldn't say that this is the most rigorous analysis that is possible, but a reasonable analysis suggesting that the major granting agencies in the U.S. could direct funding towards open access publication without significantly impacting the funding of the research enterprise itself. So we think that this is a bearable cost for funding agencies. And in fact, they're already funding this, because most APC-driven publication that's happening today is coming through grants. So this is not really new, but this was in an attempt to analyze what this would look like on a larger scale basis. So we're trying to put these ideas into action at the University of California by modeling offsetting agreements that we are hoping to begin to negotiate with publishers starting really in the upcoming cycle. We have many conversations that are going on right now. And we think what we're iterating is a design that could work in North America, where we have a very decentralized system. We can't expect the kinds of deals that exist in Europe, for example, to be replicable in the US or elsewhere in North America. So here's our thinking. We're thinking about pilots with a small number of publishers. This is going to be complicated, and so we can't do a lot at once. But we would be targeting publishers that currently charge APCs, initially thinking about the bundled licenses with large publishers. So this is the context of an offsetting agreement. But I would like us to also involve at least one native OA publisher. This model in theory, shouldn't just be limited to big deal publishers. It should be extensible to any publisher that charges article processing charges. So the goal would be to have a level playing field and not to be privileging big deal publishers over native OA publishers who have really led the way. Eventually, we think that this could be extended to all of the publishing arrangements at the university. Our goals to encourage OA publishing by our authors, to control our total cost to UC by eliminating what we see as a double-dipping phenomenon right now. We know that we're spending millions above what we know we're spending in licensing costs on APCs as well, much of that with the big publishers. But we don't, although we know that in theory, we don't really have control over that spending. We want a model that we think could work in the North American context. We want to explore the pay-it-forward ideas about incorporating authors into the process. We want to find a way to incorporate research funding into the payment stream along with library funding, and to gather information that can inform future transition. So this is just another walkthrough of our sort of model of what author participation would look like. Initially, the libraries would subsidize each APC. We would pay this directly to the publisher in some bulk fashion so that it's not a transaction-by-transaction arrangement. This would apply to UC corresponding authors. Corresponding authors would so we would subsidize up to some limit. We would ask our authors to pay the remainder of the APC at the time of acceptance. Once that decision is made, authors can opt out of this arrangement if they wish, but we're hoping that the uptake would be high. Authors would be asked to make use of their grants funds, and right now, in our thinking, that is a transactional aspect of this model, although we'd love to find a way to make that less transactional. Authors without grant funding can request support from our library OA fund, and we would redirect most of our subscription spend to that OA fund so that we would be reusing subscription funds today to fund the OA publication. And we envision this in a pilot in a way that minimizes risk on both sides. So we would set caps on the maximum side and on the minimum side so that we can all enter this in a pilot arrangement without taking undue financial risk on either side. So our system-wide faculty library committees are very behind this approach, and they're the ones that have said, well, these are the great benefits for authors. This is what we should tell our authors. You can make your articles OA with your publisher of choice. Your APC is greatly reduced. The library will cover the full APC if you don't have grant or other funding sources, and you don't have to participate if you don't want to. So what's not to like? For the university, wider dissemination of our research. We get control over the APC payments that we now think of as double-dipping payments. We're able to bring grant funding into the payment stream, and that should reduce the pressure on library budgets, which is where there is so much pressure right now. And of course, we think that we could exercise leadership if this is successful in bringing this model, extending this model to North America. So we've done a lot of work over the last year or two to get faculty and administrative buy-in. We've talked with our system-wide committees about our Pay It Forward project, about OA 2020. We've developed pros and cons documents, which our faculty have brought back to campuses and discussed at length. We've vetted our offsetting model with our various campus committees, and we've gotten sign-off from all of these committees fairly recently to really go in this direction quite seriously on behalf of the university. So a lot of coalition building to get to this place, and supportive faculty leadership, I will say, has been very key to getting here. There's still more faculty conversations that need to happen at a system-wide level, where there's a high level of understanding and advocacy around all of these issues. There's very strong support, but there are a lot of people out there, and not everyone has the same level of knowledge or investment in these issues. So we are looking at some next steps right now to negotiate agreements with publishers. We have quite a few conversations underway. I would say that there's goodwill everywhere in all of these conversations. They're all very positive. we're aware that the design that we're proposing is one that doesn't necessarily fit with existing acceptance workflows and systems, and so there's probably some work that needs to be done on the design side, on the publisher side, as well as on our side, and we want to proceed cautiously. Probably I would be more aggressive than our campuses, who feel there's a lot of work here and a lot of risk, so we all want to be careful in how we go forward. We do have a lot of faculty outreach to do, and so we're planning to do that as well. And we want to work with lots of other libraries and stakeholders and really vet this idea, expose this idea more widely, and get more brilliant minds to consider how to move forward. I just wanted to say a couple of things about APC, non-offsetting models, because we don't think that that is the entire universe. You know, our Pay It Forward study was predicated on a complete flip to APCs, but that was really a research question. It's not to say that we expect the world will all look like an APC model. There are many other models that we already support. The UC Libraries recently published this document called Pathways to Open Access, which outlines a range of directions for open access business models. And we're planning to convene a workshop in the fall for other libraries on this topic, and we hope we'll bring together lots of libraries to talk about how to actually move forward in various ways of supporting open access. Naturally, we do already support many non-APC models and a range of initiatives, and we really want to see what can be successful in the marketplace. And different models will work for different communities. We realize that as well. We're also keen to nurture other models, so many of you may be aware of the Move It Forward initiative that is a follow-on to Pay It Forward. This is a project being run out of UC Davis, which initially is bringing together a very small number of publishers. There was an application process, so many of you may be aware of it, to hold a workshop, will happen in June of this year, to look at what kinds of business models publishers are thinking about other than the offsetting kind of model that I was just talking about, and see if there's something productive that can come out of that as well. So we're very eclectic in our thinking, but we really think that if you're talking about the preponderance of research literature, that some way of working with the large publishers and with the corpus of existing publications is going to be necessary to move forward in a significant way. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivy. Are there any pressing questions before we move on to the last speaker?